The Philadelphia Eagles are just one win away, one more win at Lincoln Financial Field away from clinching a Super Bowl berth for the second time in, I believe, 5 years. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the EPA Podcast brought to you by Bleeding Green Nation. I'm your host, as always, Victor Williams. Be sure to follow me on all social platforms over at the Philly Pod. Be sure to subscribe to BGN Radio on all platforms, wherever you get your shows, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your shows. Be sure to subscribe, rate 5 stars, leave those reviews. Each and every one does help with the exposure. Bleeding Green Nation help bring it to more eyes and ears of Eagles fans and football fans alike. Joined as always, my faithful co-host. You can find him over on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. Be sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel where he breaks down everything Eagles as far as film is concerned. He is Shane Haff, and we're here. Last week we were like, hopefully we're talking about another win and previewing another playoff matchup, and here we are at the NFC Championship game where the Eagles are just one win away against Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers from taking another trip to the Super Bowl. How's it feel, buddy?
Feels pretty good. If you told me before the season that Brock Purdy was all that stood between the Eagles and a Super Bowl, I would have taken that in a heartbeat. So feels pretty good. It was nice to see the Eagles just dominate someone again. We hadn't seen that in a while. Obviously, the Bears game back before Christmas was a tight game. Eagles didn't play their best, and then you had back-to-back weeks of Gardner Minshew, and then the Week 18 vanilla game plan, and then a bye week, and you're watching all these other playoff teams play. And I feel like people just forgot how dominant the Eagles truly have been this season. They are the best team in the NFL, and they reminded everyone why they have that best record, as they just took the Giants down 38-7. So it was a fun weekend. Made a little more fun by the callback, I guess, to 5 years to the day, 38-7 over the Vikings, get 38-7 over the Giants. All I'm saying is the last time the Eagles won a playoff game 38-7, we all know what happened.
Exactly. And yeah, if you would have told me, like you mentioned, that Brock Purdy was the only QB in our way, it wasn't going to be Aaron Rodgers, it wasn't going to be Dak Prescott, it wasn't going to be anyone else, that it's Brock Purdy in his very last draft pick in the draft, leading the 49ers to the NFC Championship game, that he is the last guy in the way. This is even a better situation than Case Keenum. Obviously, the defense is a lot better, and we'll get into that. But yeah, the Eagles reminded everybody, especially Jalen Hurts, he pretty much abolished any lingering doubts about his throwing ability with pretty much the first pass attempt, that 40-yard strike to Devonta Smith. The game was over 45 seconds in my opinion. So after you saw that throw and catch, you pretty much knew that Jalen Hurts, the MVP, was back. And once the Giants, for whatever reason, and I'll get your thoughts on this as well, Shane, for whatever reason, once they were down 7-0 and Brian Daboll decided to be uber aggressive and go for it on 4th and 8, I think it was, and then they didn't convert on that, gave the Eagles a short field, and the Eagles, of course, take advantage of that and score. Now you're down 14-0 right from the rip, and it's pretty hard to rely on the run game once you're in a hole like that. That pretty much takes your best playmaker in Saquon Barkley out of the game, and it was all but over at that point. So your thoughts on the game plan we saw in this game? This was the most dominant performance we've seen since probably the 48-point outburst that the Eagles had, of course, against the Giants right before the Hurts injury. But I assume you're all but encouraged that the Eagles are hitting on all cylinders. We saw A.J. Brown get kind of banged up and I guess be a little moody on the sidelines, and then he seems to be okay. But what are your thoughts of this Eagles team? Are they the best remaining team as far as these four remaining teams? You have the Chiefs, you have the Bengals, who just took down the Bills, the 49ers, and this defense, and of course Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. And the Eagles, what kind of do you have them ranked as far as the remaining of these teams?
They have the best roster. There's no doubt in my mind. They've got the best roster of anyone that's left. And I mean, of any team in the NFL, there's not some better team with a better roster that just got eliminated. They've got the best roster. And you saw it play out in this game. Like, they just dominated the Giants. They outgained them 258-64 in the first half, had 18 first downs to 3 for the Giants. And you know that you mentioned it, the Eagles go score, then the Giants just start to methodically go down the field, and they get down to the 35-yard line. And every Eagles fan is like, here we go again. It's just going to be check down, check down, check down. They're just going to move the ball. And then there's a sack, and then you're behind the sticks, and then there's another sack. And then you get that turnover on downs. And the next the next 4 drives, for the Giants, it just snowballed. Interception, 3 straight 3-and-outs. They gained a total of 36 yards after that first drive in the first half. And I think that's what makes this defense so good. Like it can be frustrating to watch, 3rd and 2 converted, 3rd and 3 converted, but eventually your pass rush wins. Hassan Reddick beasts past Evan Neal and you get a sack and now you're behind the sticks, and the Eagles don't allow explosive plays. And so I thought they did a great job of executing that. They sacked Daniel Jones 5 times in this game, had 13 pressures. They held him in the pocket. He only had 24 yards rushing. Bradbury, obviously, with the interception. I thought the defense played at a really high level, and it's kind of a great tune-up game before you go in and play the 49ers.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And people are making so much of don't sleep on the Giants, and the Giants are hot right now. And we don't know what the Eagles are because they didn't end the year well. And Jalen Hurts looked kind of rusty in the final game. People during that month, people did forget how complete that this roster was. And it didn't take long for the Eagles defense to prove just how inexperienced, especially the Giants receivers were, between Isaiah Hodgins, who was coming on down the stretch. We talked about it last week with 200 yards plus in the last 3 games. You have Richie James and all these other guys that the Giants are going to have to rely on. But like I said, once you get down in that hole, you have to start throwing to Saquon. You can't really run the ball a whole lot. And then that's that, because that's where the Eagles thrive in 3rd and long situations. And Daniel Jones couldn't do a whole lot there. So I think the other unsung hero in this offense, obviously, is Lane Johnson and that torn abductor. He and Jason Kelce combined 0 pressures, 0 sacks, 0 QB hits. I believe Jason Kelce and his quad is a little banged up as well. But we knew, people were asking me prior to the game, like, how sure are you that Lane Johnson was going to play? I would have been shocked if he didn't suit up for this game. We all knew that he would play and do his very best. And regardless of what percentage he's at, he still looks like Lane Johnson. We were talking leading up to this game that we would take a 70% Lane Johnson over 100% Jack Driscoll. He looked like 100% Lane Johnson. Of course, there was grimacing and kind of gimping along the way, but he took Kayvon Thibodeau and other rushers out of the game. What I'm sure you are out of words to this point to speak about Lane Johnson, but how encouraged were you with his performance, and how do you feel about him moving forward and trying to go up against Nick Bosa and that lethal San Francisco defense?
Yeah, the 2 concerns I had coming into the game was just how are they going to use Jalen Hurts in terms of injury stuff? How's Lane Johnson going to hold up? Like, my only 2 concerns were really just related to health things. And, you already mentioned Jalen Hurts answered that question on like the first pass of the game. Mm-hmm. And Lane Johnson, like that first drive, I saw him a time or 2, like grab at his groin. Hey, and so
he was hobbling a little bit.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know how this is going to go, but it settled in. And he went on Chris Long's podcast. I don't know if you heard this, but he was talking about it. And he said that, obviously hadn't played in like a month. And he said, so there in the first quarter, it was hurting. And then, whatever had healed in the last month tore, and then he felt good again. So that's insane to me. Just insane.
Like scary, almost.
Yeah. So he played great after that. And, I mentioned on the podcast last week that it was a not favorable matchup for the interior offensive line with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, but they held those guys to a combined 2 pressures and 3 run stuffs, like totally took them out of the game. And the Eagles just had their way. They rushed 44 times for 268 yards and 3 touchdowns, 6.1 yards per carry. Mm-hmm. And per Next Gen Stats, they had 150 yards before contact rushing. And that's only happened 6 times this season in the NFL, and 3 of them were the Eagles. So the Eagles' offensive line is just dominant. They had 33 inside zone running plays and averaged 4.6 yards before contact. Like, just run the same play 33 times and get 4.6 yards per contract. They whipped the Giants in the trenches, and that's where they won the game. It was unbelievable to watch.
Yeah, Giants fans are screaming up and down, oh, our secondary wasn't healthy this time. We have Adoree Jackson. We have Xavier McKinney back. We have all these guys back, and this isn't going to be the same Giants team. They were right. They looked worse. They looked worse. So they were right in that regard. But the running game is definitely a lot. And you look at Kenneth Gainwell, who I'm pretty sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was a career high for 112 yards on just 12 carries. Miles Sanders chipped in 90 yards. Jalen Hurts only had to throw for 154 yards. So, Shane, I think a tune-up game was a very good way to put it, because Jalen Hurts didn't even really have to do a whole lot. He kind of punched him in the mouth in the first half, 28-0, And then they obviously, for good reason, coasted in the second half to prepare for next week. They get the extra day off as well, playing on Sunday, having played on Saturday. So Kenneth Gainwell now is seemingly becoming more and more part of the offense. I didn't think this would happen in the postseason, but now when you look at sports books for the sports bettors that are looking at Gainwell after his big game, his prop line is just 9.5 rushing yards. And for us irresponsible guys, you start to think, I should put the check on that line. Where do you how do you feel about this rushing attack moving forward? Because Hurts only rushed for 38 yards. They ran him more than they did in the season finale, but it looks like they're still trying to get him in rhythm. Don't want to put that shoulder at risk for good reason. But where are you at with the Eagles rushing attack as of now?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best rushing attack in the NFL, right? And Hurts didn't run a lot, granted. And I don't think it's because he can't. They ran him a few times, but
yeah, they did.
You're just not going to when you're up 28-0 at the drop of a hat. And I'll tell you, I felt bad for Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders played phenomenal.
Very, very well.
Like legitimately probably the best game he's had as a pro. Like his vision and his cut, it was so good the way he ran the ball. And Kenny Gainwell gets 100 yards.
Yeah, he was
Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
Kenny Gainwell gets a touchdown. Boston Scott gets a touchdown. Jalen Hurts gets a touchdown. Miles Sanders doesn't. So not only did Miles Sanders get left out of the touchdown club, a different running back got 100 yards, but Miles Sanders played great. And I think that they were also limiting his reps because it was a blowout and he was banged up at the end of the year, but it was nice to see him run so well. That's going to be huge in this upcoming matchup if the Eagles are able to run the ball like that.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be something to watch as well. Miles Sanders did all the dirty work, like you mentioned, didn't have any touchdowns to show for it. But man, what a team effort it was. Everybody got in on it. Devontae Smith continues his hot streak of over 100 yards, and of course, we're going to expect more AJ Brown next week after not needing him a whole lot in this game defensively. I saw when I was looking at snap counts, and I think I saw you mention this at one point during the week as well, is that this defensive line rotation, if you're able to keep them fresh, I don't know how you're going to stop them. And for every single member of that defensive line to be under 35 snaps and for guys to be able to come in, Brandon Graham, who got snubbed for his Comeback Player of the Year award. We could talk about that briefly later. And Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph and Josh Sweat and all these other guys, nobody played a single snap over 35. When you have a defensive line that deep that you can just rotate bodies in and out and still be just as productive, like I mentioned, I don't know how they're going to stop that. How'd you feel about the snap rotation? And when you saw the snap counts, what kind of stood out to you most?
Yeah, that pass rush rotation, like you mentioned, is huge just for keeping guys fresh. And, don't forget the Eagles coming off of a bye week and are able to keep their snap counts that light versus a team like the 49ers who's played back-to-back weeks and they have one day less rest this time around than the Eagles. So the Eagles are going to be fresh. The biggest thing that stood out to me snap count wise, though, was on the offensive side. It was Zach Pascal out snapping Quez Watkins. Pascal had 25, Quez had 22. A lot of Quez's came kind of at the end too in garbage time. So it seems like Zach Pascal is the new wide receiver 3 for the Eagles, unless Quez was never listed on an injury report. I don't think there's anything going on there.
I don't think
maybe they just liked their matchup with running the ball more, and Pascal's a better blocker, or maybe. The streakiness of Quez just became too much, but I thought it was worth noting that Pascal outsnapped Quez this week.
Wow, yeah, that is something of note. But Quez is kind of what's the word I want to use? I guess underwhelming this season. He's been getting out muscled. Hasn't been running the sharpest routes, I would say. So it certainly makes more sense when you have the run heavy packages that you do to put Zach Pascal in there and to use him more effectively. I want to talk about CJ Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship because maybe we have Avonte Maddox back this week. We'll find out as practice goes on. I think the Eagles return to practice today, and we'll see the injury reports. But, man, Reed Blankenship and undrafted. We've been talking about Brock Purdy and Mr. Irrelevant and all that. Reed Blankenship, undrafted out of Middle Tennessee, plays 92% of the defensive snaps in an NFC Divisional Round game. We have rightfully given Howie so much praise of the offseason additions and grabbing CJ Gardner-Johnson and all this other stuff. But man, when you find undrafted free agents that can be contributors not only during the season but in a playoff game, that is unheard of as well. He and Marcus Epps locked it down on the back end. To CJ Gardner-Johnson, his versatility has been a big deal as well, making up for the loss of Avonte Maddox when Josiah Scott hadn't been the most impressive. How we already talked about Bradbury a little bit, but man, these safeties, how do you feel about Reed and CJ and the production that they've been able to provide?
Yeah, it's been huge, right? And you mentioned what Marcus Epps was he on? No, he wasn't undrafted. He was a late round guy, right?
Yeah, he was late round. Yeah,
But
yeah,
TJ Edwards was undrafted. So I mean, you've got
exactly. Yep.
two big cogs in the middle of your defense are UDFAs, and that's pretty cool that they're able to do that. Howie has always seemed to do well on like day 3 of the draft and UDFA, sometimes better than round 1 and 2.
Better than the first round.
Yeah, just trade those first round picks for day 3 picks. But yeah, it's been huge, and it allowed the Eagles defense to be a lot more flexible. I was calling for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to play the slot earlier in the year. They've started to do that more now. If Avante comes back, you would assume they bump back to Avante in the slot and put Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at safety. But there is something to be said for how good of a run defender coming downhill out of the slot Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is, and how effective he is on like tight ends, and you're facing George Kittle. So I just think it gives you a lot of flexibility. Certainly in dime packages, you could put both those guys down there and put Reed back on the field. So it gives more flexibility, which is a big deal, especially against a team whose offensive personnel is so flexible and versatile as well.
Yeah, I think being able, the versatility has always been a big deal for Jonathan Gannon's defense. And when you grabbed a guy who a week before the season who had learned the defense, and as good as he's been, thankfully he got healthy at the right time, has bode well for this defense as well. One last guy I want to touch on, and then I'll let you put a bow on this game, is Hassan Reddick. Now we've sang his praises all year long, but now we're in the postseason. And we were wondering, what's he gonna? Well, not really wondering, just kind of waiting to see what he was going to do in this game. Another 5 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and 3 QB hits. This man is on a tear. I've seen since maybe I was a child, maybe Trent Cole, similarly, but I don't remember an edge rusher or pass rusher in general being this dominant in this city during my lifetime. This guy is just been an animal, and I understand Micah is the media darling and everything he provides on defense, but man, the fact that Hassan Reddick wasn't even in the remote discussion for defensive player of the year seems to be weird to me. But man, I am out of good things to say about Hassan Reddick, and he gets to do it in front of his hometown. And the more he does this, and the longer he plays in Eagles green, and the more he continues to stuff the stat sheet, the more I see his contract, I think to myself that he is woefully underpaid.
Yeah, absolutely. He's biggest steal of free agency last year, maybe one of the biggest free agent steals ever. The way that he's played, he just abused Evan Neal for that game. And
poor rookie, man.
we'll talk about Mike McGlinchey here in a minute, a guy that Micah Parsons made defy gravity in the Cowboys 49ers game. But that's who Hassan Reddick's going to be rushing against in this game. So, I expect Reddick to continue to go on a tear, but he has been on one for the last 2 months, man. It's been crazy.
Yeah, he's going to, I feel like he's going to compete with Malcolm Jenkins for the greatest free agent signing in this franchise history. Obviously, it's only been one season, but this one season has been something else. I do want to talk about the AP awards and the finalists that were announced this morning. But before we get into that, anything else you want to touch on for this game that we haven't hit on as we move past the Giants and look ahead towards the 49ers?
No, I think that's about it. Just,
you said this was long enough.
Yeah, this game, just a blowout. There's really not much interesting to talk about left in this one. Just total domination, and I hope we do the same thing this weekend. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, I hope we can put a rest. I hope that this puts a rest to the myth that it's hard to beat a team 3 times, because it surely didn't matter this weekend. So real quick, the AP awards, because they announced all the finalists earlier today, and there were some notable snubs and there's some notable names that we should go over. So just because we were talking about Brandon Graham, who only had to play 12 snaps in the Giants game, but still were able to get a sack. I just want to make it known to these people that this man is 34 going on 35. And I can imagine, I've never torn my Achilles or ruptured it or anything, but I can imagine that at a guy who's 8 years older than I am, 9 years older than I am, and has to recover from that and maintain the same burst and be able to get off the line of scrimmage against all pro athletes, 300-pounders, and get to the quarterback. And this man logged a career high 11 sacks, double-digit sacks and he isn't in the conversation for comeback player. And mind you, he was out since week 2. I think the 49ers game is when it happened, I believe, last year. So he goes down. He's out for the year. He rehabs it, comes back as in his mid-30s, and puts up the best year of arguably the best year of his career. And who are the names that make it? Geno Smith, who I'm still trying to figure out what he came back from. I understand that he was written off and all this, but I feel like if you're bad for years and you came back from the bench, that doesn't make you a comeback player of the year candidate. But that's just me. Shane, I'll get your thoughts on that in a second. Saquon Barkley, who I think only missed 5 games last year. I understand he tore it up this year, but I think he only missed 5 games. And Christian McCaffrey, who is seemingly comeback player of the year candidate every year because he's hurt every year. So those names, when I saw them, and I didn't see Brandon Graham's name, and I was like, all right, I get it. Defensive players don't win it a whole lot. When you look at the list, it's Burrow and all these other guys and Alex Smith for obvious reasons. But man, your thoughts, or maybe you were expecting it, your thoughts when you didn't even see Brandon Graham mentioned in that comeback player of the year award list.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, notably coming off of a sprained ankle in 2021.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Christian McCaffrey, I believe, was also a sprained ankle,
hamstring,
and Geno Smith come back from being
a journeyman, a journeyman. That's a comeback. So, that's warranting a comeback award. I don't understand.
Yeah, that's awful. There's no doubt. There should be no debate over who comeback player of the year is. It's the 34-year-old coming off a torn Achilles that broke double-digit sacks and set a personal record en route to helping the Eagles set a franchise record and leading the NFL in sacks by almost 20. So, that it's absurd that Brandon Graham isn't the shoe. There shouldn't even be finalists. Like, they should have just given it to him already because it's so obvious.
How isn't he? I can understand if he's a finalist and just didn't win. I'd be happy about it. But how isn't he even considered? And like I said, I know defensive players and all that stuff that doesn't catch the eye and all that. But man, I am stunned that he wasn't even listed as far as that award is concerned. And then the other snub we will have, and I'm not really upset about this one because I understand they take rosters into account. So I believe there was like a lot of back and forth about this because Sirianni was listed like in the final 5, but then wasn't in the final 3 or something like that. So it's Shanahan, Brian Daboll, Doug Peterson are the final 3 for Coach of the Year. And then it was Sirianni and who's the 5th? McDermott, I believe. I don't know why he was there. So our thoughts regarding Sirianni not being a finalist despite having the best record in football, despite having the best record in franchise history, and also why didn't Dan Campbell make this list? Take McDermott off and put Dan Campbell on that list.
Yeah, the last time the Eagles had a coach in the running for Coach of the Year, a coach that he beat in Sean McVay got it and then made an early playoff exit. So this year, you have a coach that Sirianni beat not once, not twice, but 3 times, who made an early playoff exit in there, and then the coach that he's about to beat this next week. So hopefully we just keep that tradition alive of disrespecting Eagles coaches who go on to win Super Bowls. But in all reality, though, if I had a vote for this award, I would vote for Doug Peterson. I think he's the most deserving for walking into the organization he did, who's had the number 1 pick each of the last 2 years in the draft, and not only getting him to the playoffs, but winning a playoff game. So I think my vote would be for Doug. I think you can make a valid argument for Daboll, Shanahan, Sirianni. I think all 4 of those guys are deserving, had great years, but I think Doug should win the award personally.
Where's Dan Campbell? Why wasn't he? Does he not deserve to be here? Take McDermott off of there. I think Dan Campbell did a lot with that Lions team. I would have liked to see the Lions in the mix for the playoffs over Tampa. At least that would have been a little more exciting. They could have made Jared Goff comeback player of the year. Yeah, he was written off too, and he looked like he was doing something. So that's good there. As far as the MVP finalists are concerned, we already kind of knew what this was going to be, but it looks like, Offensive Player of the Year awards, we have Jalen Hurts, Justin Jefferson, and Pat Mahomes. And then Shane Steichen was also listed as an Assistant Coach of the Year finalist, along with DeMeco Ryans and Lions Offensive Coordinator Ben Johnson. So good things there. Just really upset about Brandon Graham not even being considered for a comeback player of the year after the season he put up. I get it. Maybe people aren't as away from Philadelphia of what Brandon Graham is doing, but still, disheartening to say the least. And Sirianni, although not as shocking because they look at the rosters up and down. You look at what Shanahan did with 3 different QBs this year, and of course what Doug Peterson did after the Urban Meyer to turmoil. Not shocking there that they gave the edge to those guys over Nick Sirianni. Any final thoughts as far as the season awards? I know they don't really matter to this point because we have higher aspirations, but any final thoughts regarding those?
Yeah, so MVP award, you got Mahomes and Hurts, right? It's got to be one of the two. All I'm saying is, for all the talk about Jalen Hurts being a system quarterback, I saw Chad Henne come in and lead a 98-yard touchdown drive in 12 plays. So maybe Patrick Mahomes is a system quarterback. I'm just saying. The Chiefs looked fine with Chad Henne. The Eagles did not look fine with Gardner Minshew. I'm obviously joking.
Hey, the Chiefs looked damn good with Alex Smith that year. Alex Smith ran that offense fairly well. So
yeah,
definitely a system.
I'm obviously joking there. Either one of those guys is well deserving of the award, but I think Mahomes will win it because the media darling. But we'll see. We'll see how that one plays out.
Hey, you and I could run the 49ers offense if they want to talk about systems. They could put you and I in the back there at quarterback and give me Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle and all these other guys, and we could make some stuff happen. So we'll talk about, obviously, the 49ers coming up after the break. Appreciate you guys for listening to this edition of the EPA Podcast. We will be back right after the break to talk about the matchup as we look forward to facing against the 49ers with a trip to Super Bowl 57. 57, right? Is it 57? Super Bowl 57 with the trip to that Super Bowl on the line. Keep it locked right here, guys. We'll be back right after the break.
We are back here on the EPA Podcast. We're going to break down the Eagles matchup against the 49ers coming up on Conference Championship weekend. Obviously, the 49ers beat the Dallas Cowboys 19-12 on Sunday, continuing the Cowboys' drought of NFC title games. What is it, like 75 years now? Something like that?
I know. It's been. I know it hasn't happened since I've been alive. Their last conference championship appearance was '96, back when the Macarena was being played in like clubs. So that tells you how long that was going. Like Nintendo 64, people were playing. As far as winning one, yeah, heck if I know. But I know the last conference championship appearance was '96. So I was 3 at the time. So there you go.
Yeah. So been a while. Going to be at least another year, maybe several years. But the Eagles and the 49ers are going to meet in that game. And I was telling Victor before the show, kind of off the air, that this is the most hyped up I've been for a playoff game. Like, from an analyst point of view. I mean, obviously I was hyped about Super Bowl 52, but from an analyst point of view, this is the most excited I've been about a playoff matchup in a long time. Like, these are the 2 most talented rosters in the NFL, and they're facing off in an NFC title game. You just think about the players in this game. Like, for the 49ers, skill position wise, you've got George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Juszczyk. The Eagles have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders, apparently Kenny Gainwell. It's just
apparently
the players that you have, the weapons. On defense, you've got the 49ers pass rush, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, versus the Eagles pass rush. The 49ers rank 5th in the NFL in pass rush win rate. The Eagles rank 1st. Like, this is a matchup with Titans. It's a clash of Titans, and I'm so excited just to watch this one play out. I think this is going to be a great game.
Yeah, it should be a very good game, especially from just star power alone. Like, you already mentioned the personnel alone between what these 2 teams have, and even when you take Brock Purdy out of the mix, I think this was the toughest matchup that could present itself to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I will say, we discussed last week who would we rather face between Dallas and the 49ers. And part of me was thinking, like, an Eagles-Dallas championship game would be fire. But, man, it was so much more satisfying to see them lose and continue the downward spiral and not even have to worry about the risk of potentially losing to the Cowboys in a championship game. So much less stress in regards to that. I will say Sirianni's doing a conference right now and just got the alert coming through that he expects everybody to practice today, including A.J. Brown and Avonte Maddox. So hopefully we have Maddox that to help contain a lot of these skill players. But, man, one of my biggest things on defense as far as the 49ers is concerned is Fred Warner. He might be the best off-ball linebacker, and probably in football, if I had to guess, or if I was a betting man and somebody asked me who's the best off-ball linebacker in football. Fred Warner is a guy I've been watching for a long title for a long time. 130 tackles this year, 10 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, and he's even better than the numbers say because his intelligence and agility and sideline to sideline speed is so astronomical. When you have a mastermind like D'Amico Ryans behind that, mastering everything that he does, don't even worry about the pass rush. Like Fred Warner's in the middle of that defense, calling the shots and becoming the playmaker that he is. Who do you think poses the toughest matchup defensively on the 49ers end? Because Jalen Hurts hasn't seen a defense this tough in quite a bit.
Yeah, it's Warner. He's just an incredible football player. The way that he identifies and processes things, like I'm working on some 49ers all 22 stuff to put out today and tomorrow, and I just finished going through their defensive game against the Cowboys, and like there's plays like the Cowboys go empty and the 49ers are playing cover one man, and Warner is like the whole guy in the middle of the field, and Dak takes a one-step drop and he opens up to the right, and Warner reads that it's a one-step drop and just immediately triggers on an in-breaking route from the outside wide receiver and shuts it down. And like, that's just so impressive that the middle linebacker, he sees the way that Dak opens up, realizes it's a one-step drop, ball's coming out quick, and he just immediately triggers to the only in-breaking route on that side of the field. And if he's not there, that's an easy completion because Lamb put a good move on the corner. He gets open, but it just doesn't matter. That they had other snaps where like they ran dagger against the 49ers defense, and the 49ers are playing like cover two. Dagger is a concept you run against that, where your slot receiver runs the deep vertical route, and then you've got an outside receiver that runs the deep end route. And the idea is to run off the safety and throw it in behind. And that doesn't work because Fred Warner, a linebacker, just carries CeeDee Lamb 30 yards upfield on the vertical route, past the safety, and the safety just sits on the in route. You just don't do that. Linebackers don't do that. They had another one where he's lined up mugging the A gap. So think between the center and the guard. He's in that gap at the snap of the ball like he's going to rush, and he bails out and runs 20 yards up the seam with a slot receiver. He's just a phenomenal athlete. He allows them to break every coverage rule that there is. You know, you play a quarter style defense, and typically against trips, 3 receivers on one side, that weak side safety is keying the number 3 receiver. And the 49ers don't have to do that because Fred Warner can do it. And it allows them to be so creative with what they do. This is going to be a huge game for Jalen Hurts, being able to diagnose what the 49ers are doing, because they love to change things post-snap. And Warner is a huge part of everything that they do in that regard.
Yeah, any linebacker that can run stride for stride with all pro wide receivers is somebody you're going to have to worry about. He did it with CeeDee Lamb. We'll see how the Eagles try to counter that, because he isn't the only problem on that defense. It's also the pass rush and Nick Bosa, who, regardless if it's Mailata or Lane Johnson, wherever Bosa is going to line up, one of them is going to be responsible for Nick Bosa. Now, the good news is, I don't know if it's necessarily good news, but if you can somehow take Nick Bosa out of the equation, the other pass rushers aren't. I mean, they're not terrible, but they're not great either. So the 49ers have 44 total sacks on the year, right? 18 and a half of them belong to Nick Bosa. After that, the drop-off is substantial. You have Samson Ebukam with 5 sacks. You have Charles Amenahu with 4.5, who's dealing with some legal issues as of right now. And you have Drake Jackson with 3, and then a whole bunch of other guys with 2, 1, and half sacks. So if you could take Nick Bosa, who's far and away the sack leader on that defense, you can kind of contain the other guys and hopefully give Jalen Hurts some time. What is the best recommendation from your standpoint on how to try and nullify, to the best of your ability, a pass rusher like Nick Bosa, who's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, I think you look at what the Cowboys, or what they did against the Cowboys to Micah Parsons, what the Eagles did. There was a lot of leaving him unblocked and putting him into conflicts in space. There was a lot of double teaming. Obviously, that was before Lane Johnson got hurt in that game, and Jack Driscoll came in. But I think you want to try to double him. I think you want to try to roll away from him. You want to leave him unblocked, put him in conflict on some of those plays. Like Bosa versus Mailata is a huge matchup. Mailata ranks 56th this year among offensive tackles in pass block win rate. And so Bosa versus Mailata is a big thing to watch. Bosa versus Lane Johnson's a big thing to watch too. You know, Lane looked good. Lane wasn't facing Nick Bosa, and Kevon Thibodeau's good. He's no Nick Bosa. And so that's going to be big. And the 49ers are going to do a lot to isolate Bosa on these guys. They love to mug gaps, get linebackers standing up in the A gaps, and get your slot corner in there like he's going to blitz. And then they bail guys out and they change coverages after the snap. They will try to set it up where you have to slide away from Nick Bosa and you leave him one-on-one with guys. And so, the Eagles, that's going to be a big game for Jason Kelce, identifying things for backs and pass protection. One thing the Cowboys tried to do is they would have Dalton Schultz like block, not like chip block and go out into a route. It was like he would full on block for like a second and then just release, and they would hit him a lot. And so I think you can do some things like that, especially as creatively as they use Fred Warner running up the seams. That short area of the field can open up. You can hit your check downs to your receiver or your running backs over the middle. You can hit those block and release routes to your tight ends. So that's some of the things that I would try to do. But at the end of the day, I don't think you try to do too much. Don't try to get too cute, because you do have the best offensive line in football. You've got 5 guys that are top tier players, and I think you trust them as well. So it's something to watch, but I don't think it's something that you over adjust to unless it starts to cause problems.
Yeah, they're gonna have to try and figure out that pass rush, because Eric Armstead is there in the mix too, and he's not an easy guy to block as well. So as long as Lane Johnson can hold up, you mentioned he was good against Kayvon Thibodeau last week, but Nick Bosa is a whole different animal. So depending on wherever he is lined up, whether it's Mailata or Lane Johnson, that's going to have to be matchups to watch as well. As far as the outside is concerned, the cornerbacks are underwhelming for the 49ers. The Eagles, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. 49ers have Lenore on the outside because they are, Javarius Ward and Emmanuel Mosley were there to begin the season, and they have Jason Ferrett, who missed 105 games over his 9-year career, and he also tore his Achilles this season and never played a game. So the secondary is kind of banged up. So I feel like there are matchups there to take advantage of as far as the Eagles receivers are concerned. If you were Shane Steichen and devising up a game plan for this game, who do you think you would make the focal point of this offensive attack?
Yeah, I think you want to be able to push the ball downfield outside the numbers. They ran a lot of like cover 3 zone against the Cowboys. And when you run cover 3 zones like that, you're going to have your corners on an island. Think the Jim Schwartz defense, right? Your corners are responsible for the deep portions of the field. And so you can take them vertically. You can run the routes where your comeback routes, your deep hitches, things like that. And so I think I would look for something like that to come from the Eagles. They've got 2 winners on the outside, and Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. That's a favorable matchup. And as good as the 49ers are in the middle of the field, they struggle deep outside the numbers. Jalen Hurts has the most passing touchdowns and the highest passer rating in the NFL this season when throwing 25 plus yards, and the 49ers defense is bottom 5 defending that. There was a play in the Cowboys game where CeeDee Lamb just straight up burned his cover 3 corner and Dak underthrew it. And Lamb made a great play on it to catch it. But if that ball's in stride, it's a 75-yard touchdown pass. And so I think those opportunities will present themselves, and Hurts has to hit on those. Hopefully A.J. Brown is 100%, but I would be trying to push the ball downfield against these corners on the boundaries. I think that's one of your most favorable matchups in this game.
Yeah, Lenore on the outside was the same guy that Quez Watkins beat for that 91-yard pass last season, although that pass ended up resulting in no points. We try to forget about that. But the Eagles certainly familiar with that guy on the outside, so I anticipate that they'll target him over Javarius Ward, so we'll see how all that shakes out as well. I think the toughest part of this game plan is going to be running on this defense. The 49ers allow 79 rushing yards per game. That's second in the league. 22 rushing attempts per game. That's first. 3.4 yards per attempt. That's second. Only 4.5 rushing first downs per game. Good for first in the league. And only 19% of their runs result in first downs allowed. So that is also first in the league. Do the Eagles have any hope to run this ball down the throats of the 49ers? Or like you just mentioned, you're just gonna throw it downfield and hope you can catch these corners lacking?
Yeah, so the Eagles run inside zone out of 11 personnel more than anyone in the league. This season, the 49ers allow 3.2 yards per carry to inside zone runs. So that said, they haven't faced a team with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts in terms of mobility. Marcus Mariota earlier in the season, I think Bosa missed that game, so I don't want to look at it too much, but Mariota had a good running game there. The 49ers like to run light boxes because they have two high safeties a lot. The problem against, you can defend the run out of that. It's tougher, but you can do it. The problem is now that when you have a mobile quarterback, not only are you down one in the box, you're down two in the box. And the Eagles' offensive line is so good. So I think the threat of Hurts in the running game is huge here, as is the fact that the 49ers, they base out of nickel personnel 4-2-5. Sometimes they'll run 4-3, but they don't have like that 5 down front setup that the Eagles have. And so what you saw Dallas do was Dallas went multiple tight ends. They tried to get heavy and run between the tackles. And they had some success doing that early. I think you could see the Eagles do that. It might be more of a 12 personnel game, or they might, 12 personnel running and spreading it out and trying to run your zone read stuff, I think are both going to be valid approaches to run on the 49ers defense.
So one of the two names that are kind of headlining this matchup is the elite level of tight end play between George Kittle and Dallas Goedert. George Kittle scoring a ton of touchdowns between the end of the season as well as the playoffs, and Dallas Goedert, who's solidified himself as a top 5, if not top 3 tight end this season as well. If you are a betting man and somebody came to you and said, who's going to post the better box score for this game, which are you leaning towards, Kittle and Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, I think Dallas Goedert is a slightly better tight end than George Kittle. However, George Kittle versus Kazir White and TJ Edwards is a much better matchup than Dallas Goedert against Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. So I don't think Goddard's going to have a bad game or anything like that, but I definitely think that George Kittle will have the better game out of the two.
Yeah, I think the linebacker matchups are a little more favorable as far as the 49ers are concerned. It's funny because back before we even had moderately good linebackers, we've been lucky enough to have them this year. Back in the Nathan Gary and Alex Singleton days, I would watch Fred Warner and be like, man, I would do heinous things to have a linebacker like this with the Philadelphia Eagles. And now at least we have TJ Edwards and Kazir White, who I believe, I don't think Kazir will be here next year just because they have Nakobe waiting in the wings. We'll have to see what they do with this list of 20 pending free agents, but it's good to have decent linebacker play this season. I think one of the things early on in the year, the turnover differential was such a big thing for the Eagles. They've kind of tapered off as far as takeaways are concerned, and the 49ers are elite at turnovers. They're second in the NFL in takeaways this season. They have 30 of them, and they are third in giveaways, meaning they don't give it away that often, just third in the league with only 17 giveaways. So they take it away a lot. They don't give it up that often. How do you think the Eagles, what is the best way to try and generate turnovers? The obvious answer is to get pressure on Brock Purdy. Probably hasn't dealt with an atmosphere like Philadelphia, maybe ever in his life. He went to Iowa State, so I doubt he's seen anything close to what he's going to see in Philadelphia. I think Brock Purdy's in for a real shock when he gets to Philly. But Shane, is it as simple as you get pressure on Brock Purdy, make him uncomfortable, force him to make bad decisions? Or is Shanahan so clever that he's not even going to allow Purdy to be in such situations?
No, it's definitely pressure. He really struggled in the Cowboys game when he was pressured. And the 49ers have not really played good defenses since Purdy took over. The Cowboys are the best defense they've played, and the Cowboys defense doesn't touch the Eagles defense. Even in the pass rushing, they're not as good as the Eagles. Their secondary is definitely not as good. And so when pressured in the Cowboys game, Purdy only completed 33% of his passes for 4.6 yards per attempt with a 12.5% sack rate, 12.5% first down rate, and he had a 49 passer rating versus when he wasn't pressured, it was 88% completion percentage, double the yards per attempt, 9.4, and he had a 53% first down rate, 105 QB rating. So it was night and day when he was pressured and when he wasn't. You look at the Eagles, they pressured Daniel Jones on 46% of his dropbacks. And so getting pressure is going to be huge. And then just the environment, you mentioned it, like he played at Iowa State, right? He's a rookie. If you go back to college, he was 20-4 in home games in college, and he was 10-13 in road games. Since he's become starter in the NFL, he's only played 2 road games. He played Seattle, which is a tough place to play. And then he played the Raiders, and that was probably half San Francisco fans in the crowd because nobody goes to Raiders games, kind of like nobody goes to Chargers games. he hasn't traveled across the country for a game. Every game's been on the West Coast. And so if you get that West Coast traveling to the East Coast thing in there as well, like he has not faced a defense like the Eagles. He has not played in an environment like Philadelphia. And I think those are huge factors in this game.
Yeah, that's definitely the big thing. When we were talking about who do you want to face between Dallas and Philly, a lot of people were saying bring Purdy to Philadelphia and let him let him feel that for a while. The atmosphere was amazing last week. It's only going to be even more crazier this weekend. So we'll have to see how Purdy handles all of that, because we know the Eagles thrive in that home stadium. This is why you work all season long to clinch that number 1 seed, and it's for situations like this in the cold weather. I don't know how Purdy's going to do, and all of that. Any other? I'm kind of running down the list of matchups here. Any other matchups you kind of have circled as far as this game is concerned before we go ahead and get into predictions?
Yeah, I mentioned Reddick versus Mike McGlinchey earlier.
Oh, yeah,
that's a huge one. McGlinchey gave up a team high 5 pressures against Dallas, and if you haven't seen the picture of Micah Parsons like throwing him and he's parallel to the ground, you need to go find that on Twitter. I tweeted it at one point. Everybody tweeted it. Just if you Google image search Mike McGlinchey, you'll probably come up with it. But it's just insane that a 310-pound man was parallel to the ground like that. But so that's going to be huge. Another thing that's huge in this game is just going to be the Eagles' coverage rules. They're going to be tested so much. Like the 49ers run 21 personnel, which is 2 running backs, 1 tight end at the highest rate in the league, 43%. But that doesn't look like I formation. Like they're so positionless. Kyle Juszczyk is a fullback or he's a tight end. Christian McCaffrey's a running back or he's a slot receiver. Or heck, you can put him out all the way at the boundary as a receiver. He can run a full route tree. George Kittle, you can attach him to the line. You can put him in the slide. He can go outside. Deebo Samuel is a running back sometimes. Like they can come out in 21 personnel and they could be an I formation or they could be in an empty set. And it just puts so much stress on your defense figuring out how to deal with that. You add on to that, they motion at the second highest rate in the league. 71% of their plays, there's somebody in motion. And that stresses your coverage rules even more, especially when it's a guy like Christian McCaffrey coming out of the back. Like the Eagles motion Miles Sanders out and go into empty. Miles Sanders is running like one of 2 routes. He's going to run a drag or a flat route. That's pretty much it. That's all that's in his arsenal. Christian McCaffrey can run any route in the route tree. And so he becomes a receiver. And now you've got to push your coverage. And the Eagles have been very good with their coverage rules and their communication and stuff. They've never faced a team that's going to muddy that up as much as the 49ers will. And so that's going to be a huge thing to watch. And then just the 49ers are an outside zone rushing team, right? The Eagles are inside zone, and that's the strength of the 49ers run defense. The 49ers like to run outside zone, and the Eagles are very good defending outside zone. They only allow 3.2 yards per carry to outside zone. So I wonder if you're going to see the 49ers try to run more, through the A gaps, through the B gaps, between the tackles at least, because that has been the vulnerability of the Eagles run defenses through the tackles. So, when they get into their 5 down fronts, when you've got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson coming off the edge, it's hard to get outside of that. So I'm interested to see, how Shanahan approaches the running game in this one too.
Yeah, that's a good point, because even toward the end of that game, when McCaffrey was coming out, Elijah Mitchell punished Dallas down the stretch there. So they have so many guys who can do so many different things. Brandon Ayuk, who I still think Devontae Smith is the more polished route runner, but Brandon Ayuk is no slouch. He has some filthy routes in his bag. He's a very good route runner. You have Deebo and Kittle and Juszczyk and McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, and it's so many. Even like Juwan Jennings is running around sometimes, and they find him. Like so many guys who can get free, and it's going to come down to Brock Purdy making the plays. And hopefully, if like you said, if the Eagles can get home, it's going to be tough for Brock Purdy to find those guys. It doesn't matter how good the skill players are if the ball never makes it to their hands. So we're going to have to see. Shanahan's done a good job to this point of not asking Brock Purdy to do a whole lot, but this game is going to be a whole lot different. I'll take every day of the week the rookie 7th round quarterback up against the defensive line with 75 sacks to their name in one season. I'll take that matchup any day and all day. So that's something that I'm looking forward to watching as well. So predictions before we get up out of here. Shane, I'll let you go first. The final score: do the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl, or are they going home and we're gonna have to watch Brock Purdy in the championship match? Which way are you swinging for this one? What final score do you have?
Let me ask you this first. How many points does Brock Purdy need to put up on the Eagles defense before you're concerned that the Eagles lose the game?
I'll say, man, if they put up like just total or like by a certain point, like if it's like if they have 21 in the second quarter, you're like, oh man, we're in trouble. Or like,
I mean, just like total, like it's the Eagles offense is so good. Like it feels to me like the 49ers are not just going to shut that down. In the last 5 games Jalen Hurts has played and tried to win, I'm going to discount week 18. The Eagles have scored 38 points per game. And so even if the 49ers, let's say they're the best defense in the league and they knock 14 points off of that, you're still putting up 24 points. Is Brock Purdy coming into the link and putting up 24 points? Like
yeah, I was going to say.
They put up 19 against Dallas, and Dallas's defense isn't as good. I just don't. I think these are 2 very good rosters. The Eagles hold key advantages in 3 spots: in quarterback, in pass rush, and how that relates to the quarterback pressure, how they play under pressure. Hurts is good when pressured, Purdy is not. And then your cornerback play. I just can't see the 49ers keeping up with the Eagles defense. With the Eagles offense. The only way I see this game really being a concern is if the Eagles beat themselves. And Brock Purdy, since he's become the starter, they've had 22 possessions start on short fields. That leads the NFL. Second place is only 13. They've produced turnovers. They've got short fields, and they've converted it into points. And the Eagles just aren't a team that gives the ball away. I think the only team that can beat the Eagles is the Eagles, and Jalen Hurts just doesn't implode. I feel really confident about this game. I don't think Brock Purdy is coming into the link and he's putting up 20 points, and I don't think you can beat the Eagles without doing that. So I'm going to say 27-13 Eagles is my score.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because when you put it that way, like if it gets into a shootout, although the 49ers do have the firepower to match up with the Eagles, I don't know if Brock Purdy has it in him. Like we've seen them put up points, but not against defenses like this. And to your point, they struggle with Dallas's defense, and the Eagles are a whole different animal. It's funny because even when I talk to fans and media, like there's a lot less worry in this game than there was last week against the Giants. There was a lot more panic last week, but I guess that once they saw the way they played, that kind of nullified all that. And now they're like, we can take down the 49ers. So my score, as far as I'm concerned, I think the Eagles win this game by 2 scores. I think it's 31-17. I know they're 2.5-point favorites, and the home team usually gets about a 3-point bump. So it'll be a pick 'em at that point. But I think the Eagles win this game handedly. I think the 49ers do make some noise, but the defense is just too much for Brock Purdy to overcome. Still a rookie, despite everything good he's done. And I have 31-17 and another trip to the Super Bowl, hopefully. And then we'll have to see how the AFC side shakes out. Anything you want to say as far as the AFC side before we put a ball on it? I know you usually have some thoughts regarding the other conference. You pulling for Burrow in this one?
Yeah, it's strange. Like, who's the better matchup for the Eagles in the Super Bowl if it gets to that point?
Oh, man, part of me says Kansas City.
I know, right? Like, part of you says Kansas City because Patrick Mahomes banged up. Maybe he won't be then. They definitely don't have as good of receivers. They don't have as good a defense. But then
defense isn't scary. Like
yeah, then that's you saying though that you would like to face Patrick Mahomes, please, in a Super Bowl, and that just feels insane as well. I'm picking the Bengals in that game. I think the Bengals have the better defense. They've got better receivers. They've got an advantage matching up against the Chiefs' corners. And I think they've got the advantage nobody expected. They've got the better quarterback. With Patrick Mahomes' injury, I think Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the NFL. With the injury to Mahomes, I think he gets that bump. He's a little bit better than Mahomes playing on one ankle, which seems absurd that we even have to, it's this close of a call. Like, is he still the best quarterback in a walking boot? Maybe, but it's really close. I love Joe Burrow's quote. I don't know if you heard this. Somebody asked him about the Bengals like Super Bowl window, because the whole quarterback on a rookie contract thing, and he said that the Bengals Super Bowl window is my career.
I did.
Yeah, I love that mentality. The Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, he's done a phenomenal job as a DC. He's done a good job against Mahomes. Like on Twitter, I think it was Ben Solak pulled out the the data against elite quarterbacks over the last 2 years for the Cincy defense. So against Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, and 2021 Rodgers, the Bengals defense has allowed an EPA of 0.04 per play, and that's basically what Andy Dalton was this year. So you got Mahomes playing on a bum ankle. I think the Bengals will probably win this one. So I'm predicting an Eagles-Bengals Super Bowl matchup.
Yeah, and then not to mention Burrow's had Mahomes' number, the only QB to beat Mahomes 3 straight times, and he owns a 3-0 record over Mahomes. So he could be just the one guy that Mahomes can't beat for whatever reason, just the one guy. So
in week 13 this year, Mahomes was held to his fewest completions of the season by the Bengals. So there's some stuff there. They won 3 straight matchups. Last year rallying from 18 down in the AFC title game and beating them in overtime. So I think it's going to be a good game. But yeah, Bengals Eagles Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna pull for. That'd be mighty fun to watch as well. Although I know a lot of people are pulling for Big Red versus Sirianni and that as well. But we'll have to keep an eye on Mahomes' injury as well. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this edition of the EPA podcast, for reacting to the victory over the Giants, as well as looking ahead towards the matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. Be sure to subscribe to Bleeding Green Nation and BGN Radio on all pod platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your shows. Be sure to follow me on all social platforms at the Philly Pod, myself, Victor Williams. Shane, where can the people find you and what projects you got coming up on the YouTube channel? I know you mentioned some all 21 or all 22 stuff coming up in the next few days.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I was working on a project yesterday, heat mapping quarterback throws by zone and stuff. So I tweeted those out for Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts this morning. I'm going to do that for all the quarterbacks in the NFL over the next week or so. So you can check that out. You can check me out on YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. I'm going to be breaking down some 49ers defensive all 22 later today and into tomorrow. I'm going to try to get to some offense as well if I have the time. But go check that stuff out. It's all in the link tree. It's all in the link tree.
Nothing like a good heat map to tell you what quarterbacks are doing. Very good stuff over there. Be sure to subscribe to that channel, and you'll learn all you need to about the NFL and where the Eagles are at. Once again, guys, thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys on the next one, hopefully talking about a victory and previewing. Well, not previewing because there's a week in between, but showing our excitement for another potential Super Bowl title in Philadelphia. Thank you guys again. We'll get you guys next week. Go Birds.
Go Birds.